After 60, the body doesn't function the way it used to. We can feel it clearly in the smallest things: waking up more tired, walking more slowly. Tasks that used to be easy suddenly feel heavy. Most people think it's just part of getting older, that muscles get weaker and strength fades with age. But the truth is that simple. Muscles don't just disappear. They're taken little by little without us even noticing. And here's what's surprising. Most muscle loss doesn't happen while you're active. It happens while you sleep. That might sound counterintuitive, but science confirms it. When you go to bed, your body goes for hours without energy intake. If you haven't eaten the right kind of food beforehand, your body will start pulling protein from your own muscles just to keep basic functions going. It's a survival mechanism. But for older adults, the price is steep. Lost strength, lost balance, lost independence. And there's more. After 60, your body's ability to use protein declines. Eating enough might still not be enough. If it's not timed right, not done right, your body won't rebuild. It will actually break itself down. When you understand how your body really works, you can live stronger and healthier in a real, practical way. In this video, you'll learn why muscle loss happens even while you rest, what's actually behind muscle weakness and how to stop it, 8 easy-to-find, easy-to-use foods that, if eaten at the right time, can help you rebuild muscle every night. No gym required. No all-day changes. Just one small adjustment before bed. If you want to stay strong, live independently, and feel better every morning, this is a video you shouldn't miss. Welcome to the elderly way, where we learn to listen to our bodies during the most important phase of life. Food 8. Cottage cheese. Cottage cheese is a simple, familiar food, but when eaten at the right time, especially before bed, it can make a real difference for people over 60 who want to maintain strength and physical stability. For older adults, the concern isn't just muscle loss. It's the gradual decline in the functions tied to muscle strength. Being able to stand up without using your hands, keeping balance when turning, walking confidently upstairs. All of these are connected to whether you still have enough muscle, and whether your body can recover after each day's activity. Cottage cheese contains a special type of protein called casein, a slow-digesting protein that delivers nutrients steadily to the body for 6 to 8 hours after eating. For younger people, the speed of protein absorption doesn't make much difference. But for older adults, especially those experiencing anabolic resistance, where the body becomes less efficient at absorbing and using protein, a slow-digesting protein becomes a major advantage. When you sleep, your body enters a long fasting state. If there's no available protein in your blood to fuel energy and tissue repair, your body will start breaking down its own muscle for backup. That's why some people feel weaker over time even if they eat well during the day. Cottage cheese helps prevent this by keeping amino acid levels in the blood from dropping, right when your body needs recovery the most, at night. But that's not all. Cottage cheese also contains tryptophan, an amino acid that helps produce serotonin and melatonin, 2 key chemicals for relaxation and sleep regulation. In other words, a small portion of cottage cheese doesn't just nourish your muscles, it helps you sleep better too. That's a double benefit that older adults especially need, since poor sleep and muscle aches often go hand in hand. It's easy to use. About half a cup, 100-120 g of cottage cheese, eaten 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime. The best kind is unsweetened, low-fat, and free from artificial flavors. If you find the taste too bland, try mixing it with ripe banana, high in potassium, which helps relax muscles, or a bit of honey and cinnamon. But steer clear of sugary jams or sweet toppings. Another common variation is to add chia seeds for extra fiber and better overnight digestion. This is especially helpful for older adults who struggle with constipation or slow digestion. For those with diabetes or insulin resistance, low-fat, unsweetened cottage cheese is also a safe choice. It has a very low glycemic index and won't spike blood sugar. In a nutrition study on people over 60, adding casein protein before bed significantly improved nighttime muscle protein synthesis. This benefit happened without any change in exercise intensity, which is important for older adults, many of whom can't do heavy workouts due to joint pain, osteoporosis, or heart conditions. Another strength of cottage cheese: it's easy on the stomach, especially in moderate amounts. For those with sensitive digestion or lactose intolerance, many types of well-filtered cottage cheese are very low in lactose and unlikely to cause discomfort. Many older adults have made this light snack part of their nighttime recovery routine. Simple, no cooking, no cleanup. And more importantly, after just a few weeks of consistent use, they report deeper sleep, waking up without sore knees, back pain, or the struggle to stand. That's real recovery from within, not flashy, but absolutely real. When it comes to staying healthy in older age, you don't always need big changes. Sometimes, just a small bowl of cottage cheese before bed, night after night, is enough to help your body do something amazing. Hold on to what it's gradually losing: muscle, balance, and the sense of control over your own body. Food 7. Boiled eggs. Eggs might be one of the simplest foods in your kitchen, but for older adults, having 1 or 2 boiled eggs in the evening can significantly support muscle recovery, more than you'd expect. This isn't some new health hack. It comes down to understanding the role of eggs as a complete protein, and how that matters in the body after age 60. Each egg delivers about 6 grams of complete protein, meaning it contains all 9 essential amino acids that the body can't make on its own. That's crucial because as we age, the body becomes less efficient at processing protein. This is known as anabolic resistance, which means that even if you consume enough protein during the day, your muscles may not repair and rebuild properly at night. What makes eggs special, and the reason they're on this list, is their high leucine content. Leucine is the amino acid that triggers muscle protein synthesis. Think of it like the on switch for rebuilding muscle tissue. For older adults, whose muscle mass is naturally declining and whose protein response is weaker, leucine is key to making sure the protein you eat doesn't go to waste. Another benefit that often gets overlooked: eggs help support levels of IGF-1, a growth hormone that plays a critical role in rebuilding muscle and connective tissue. IGF-1 naturally declines with age, but maintaining a diet with high-quality protein like eggs can help slow that drop. And that has a real impact on mobility, flexibility, and even energy levels the next day. Boiled eggs also offer a practical advantage that's hard to ignore. They're easy to prepare, easy to store, and easy to digest. No need for a grill, a blender, or any complicated recipe. Just boil, peel, and eat. For older adults who may not have much appetite at night or who are prone to bloating, this is a safe, gentle option. Some people pair their eggs with a small slice of avocado, adding healthy fats and slowing digestion to provide more sustained energy through the night. A light sprinkle of black pepper or turmeric can also go on top. Pepper helps your body absorb curcumin, while turmeric helps reduce inflammation, especially useful if you often wake up with joint or muscle stiffness. For those doing light strength training, like brisk walking, resistance band workouts, or senior yoga, eating eggs before bed may help the recovery process go more smoothly. You might notice small but real changes: less stiffness in the morning, more energy when you wake up, and better endurance throughout the day. However, if you have high cholesterol or cardiovascular issues, talk to your doctor or a registered dietitian to adjust your intake as needed. For most healthy older adults, 1 to 2 boiled eggs in the evening is a reasonable and safe amount. And the most valuable thing about boiled eggs: it's not just the nutrition, it's the simplicity and accessibility. They don't require you to overhaul your lifestyle, buy expensive gadgets, or follow some complex diet plan. Just a small habit, done consistently, yet one that can create big improvements in long-term health. Food 6. Tuna in olive oil. Tuna in olive oil might not be the first thing that comes to mind when you're getting ready for bed, but for older adults, it's both a nutritional powerhouse and a practical way to support muscle health. If you want to maintain flexibility, strength, and daily recovery, the combination of high-quality protein and healthy fats in this food could be the right move. Tuna is one of the richest sources of lean protein, packed with amino acids, especially leucine, which activates muscle protein synthesis. After age 60, the body needs nearly twice as much of this process compared to younger people just to maintain existing muscle mass. Unlike many red meats, tuna is low in saturated fat, which makes it easier to digest at night. But what really sets this food apart isn't just the tuna, it's the oil it's packed in. Tuna in olive oil delivers extra monounsaturated fats, which not only support heart health but also slow down protein absorption. This allows your body to maintain a steady level of amino acids in the blood throughout the night, exactly what you need when you're not eating from evening until morning. One study found that the combination of protein and omega-3s, like those in tuna and olive oil, not only boosts muscle protein synthesis, but also reduces low-grade inflammation in muscle tissue, something common in older adults, especially those who stay active with walking, gardening, or light exercise. Another plus, this food is naturally high in vitamin D, a nutrient closely linked to muscle strength, coordination, and fall prevention. And since older bodies absorb less vitamin D from sunlight, getting it through food becomes even more essential. How to use it? About half a can of tuna, 60-80 g, eaten 30 to 45 minutes before bedtime. Choose tuna packed in extra virgin olive oil, not mixed vegetable oil or water-packed. You can pair it with a few cucumber slices, some whole grain crackers, or just eat it straight if you don't want to feel too full. One thing to avoid: don't mix in mayo or other sauces high in saturated fat. They can cause bloating, indigestion, and disrupt your sleep. If you want more flavor, just add a squeeze of lemon, a pinch of sea salt, or a dash of black pepper. Simple, clean, and easy on digestion. Also worth noting, tuna is rich in selenium, an antioxidant that helps the body manage oxidative stress, a major factor in age-related muscle loss. If you're 60 plus and still leading an active lifestyle, walking daily, climbing stairs, or playing light sports like golf or tai chi, adding protein in the evening is something you shouldn't overlook. Tuna in olive oil gives you the right kind of protein and helps you make the most of your nightly rest when the bulk of muscle recovery happens. Even if you're not very active, this food still helps prevent gradual muscle loss, a major reason many older adults slowly lose their independence without realizing it. You don't need to eat this every night, but keeping a few cans of high-quality tuna in the pantry is a smart move. No complicated prep, no cooking required. Just pop the lid and give your body what it truly needs. Fuel for recovery and strength maintenance. Food 5. Greek yogurt. If there's one food that combines great taste with benefits for muscles, digestion, and sleep, it's Greek yogurt. And not the sweet, colorful, processed stuff you see on supermarket shelves, but the real deal. Plain, unsweetened, protein-rich, probiotic-packed Greek yogurt. For older adults, it's one of the rare foods that can help rebuild muscle, support gut microbiota, and not spike blood sugar levels. What makes Greek yogurt stand out right away is its high protein content, mainly casein, a slow-digesting protein also found in cottage cheese. This means if you eat Greek yogurt in the evening, your body will have a steady supply of nutrients throughout the night to help repair muscle tissue. This slow and consistent protein delivery is especially beneficial for older adults, whose ability to absorb protein tends to decline with age. But that's only half the story. Greek yogurt also contains billions of probiotics, the gut-friendly bacteria that improve digestion, enhance the absorption of vitamins and minerals, and reduce low-grade inflammation throughout the body. This kind of inflammation is a hidden contributor to muscle loss and decreased energy in older individuals. Studies show that people over 60 with a healthy gut microbiome tend to absorb protein more efficiently, maintain better muscle mass, and feel more energized compared to those with imbalanced gut bacteria. That makes Greek yogurt a true two-in-one food. It supports both muscle and digestive health. And it doesn't stop there. Greek yogurt is also a good source of calcium, potassium, and vitamin B12, three key nutrients for muscle and bone strength, as well as for proper nerve function. For older adults who often deal with declining bone density or muscle weakness, these micronutrients are more crucial than ever. Another bonus: Greek yogurt has less natural sugar than regular yogurt because the whey liquid has been strained out. This makes it a better option for people with diabetes or anyone trying to manage their weight. You can enhance the flavor by adding a dash of cinnamon, a few slices of fresh strawberries, or a small spoonful of chia seeds, all of which won't spike your blood sugar but will boost fiber and antioxidant levels. The ideal time to eat it is about 30 to 45 minutes before bedtime. A serving of a half to 3/4 cup is enough. Choose a plain version with no added sugar or artificial flavoring, and if you're not avoiding fat, opt for whole milk Greek yogurt. The healthy fats can help with vitamin absorption and keep you feeling full longer. One overlooked bonus effect: better sleep. Certain probiotics in yogurt may positively influence the gut-brain axis, helping reduce mild stress and improve sleep quality. Plus, going to bed with a light, well-digested stomach makes for deeper, less interrupted sleep. In short, this is a perfect food for anyone in retirement. Eat it when you don't feel like a heavy dinner, need a light post-workout snack, or simply want something that tastes good and is good for you. It's not a trendy superfood, but it's a simple, powerful choice that can deliver long-term benefits, especially if you make it a nightly habit. Food 4. Warm milk with turmeric. This isn't just a cup of milk to help you fall asleep. When properly combined, warm milk with turmeric can support muscle recovery, reduce soreness, and improve sleep quality, especially helpful for people over 60. Milk is a natural source of casein protein, a slow-digesting protein that delivers a steady stream of amino acids throughout the night, helping the body repair and maintain muscle tissue during sleep. For younger people, this is a bonus, but for older adults, it's essential because muscle breakdown, catabolism, increases at night when the body isn't getting energy or nutrients. In addition to protein, milk also contains calcium, which is necessary for both bones and muscle contraction. Vitamin D, which aids calcium absorption and supports muscle function. And tryptophan, an amino acid that's a precursor to serotonin, the hormone that helps you relax and regulate sleep. Now let's talk about the second key ingredient, turmeric. This golden yellow spice contains a powerful compound called curcumin, known for its strong anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. For older adults, this is especially important. Chronic inflammation in muscles and joints is a major cause of morning stiffness, muscle aches upon waking, and slower recovery after physical activity. When you combine warm milk with turmeric, you're giving your body an ideal environment to rest, recover, and rebuild muscle, right at the time when you can't do anything else but lie still in bed. To get the most out of it, all you need is 1 cup of milk, about 200 ml, preferably organic, low in sugar, or A2 milk if you're lactose sensitive. Gently heat the milk until warm, not boiling. Add 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric powder and stir well. Sprinkle in a pinch of black pepper. This is important, as it helps your body absorb curcumin more effectively. If you want a bit of sweetness, you can add a drop of honey, but avoid refined sugar, which can spike your blood sugar at night. If you don't drink dairy milk, you can still use this recipe with almond, oat, or soy milk, as long as it's fortified with calcium and protein. Turmeric doesn't contain protein on its own, so the right combination is key to making it effective for muscle support. A recent study showed that older adults who drank a protein-rich beverage before bed had 30% higher rates of muscle protein synthesis compared to those who didn't drink anything. When curcumin was added to their regimen, participants reported reduced joint pain, less stiffness, and an easier time moving in the morning. An added bonus: the warmth of the milk doesn't just soothe the stomach, it also calms the sympathetic nervous system, helping you ease into a deep state of relaxation that's critical for restorative sleep, the kind directly tied to the production of growth hormone and muscle tissue repair. Warm milk with turmeric isn't a medicine, nor is it an old wives' tale with no scientific backing. It's a simple combination with clear scientific grounding, especially effective for those dealing with muscle pain, muscle loss, or trouble sleeping at night. And most importantly, it's an easy habit to build. Just 5 minutes each evening, and you've got yourself a natural, safe, and effective way to protect your muscle mass, something that aging is quietly chipping away at every day. Food 3. Almond butter. You don't need expensive supplements or complicated nutrition plans. Sometimes, just 1 spoonful of almond butter at night can bring serious health benefits. Especially for older adults, it's a simple yet effective way to support muscle health while sleeping. What makes almond butter stand out is its perfect balance of healthy fats, plant-based protein, and nerve-supporting minerals, especially magnesium. Each small spoonful delivers just enough protein to nourish your muscles through the night, while the monounsaturated fats slow digestion and keep amino acids steadily flowing in your bloodstream for hours. More importantly, the magnesium in almond butter doesn't just help relax muscles and improve sleep quality. It can also reduce nighttime leg cramps, a common but often overlooked issue in older adults. Unlike carb-heavy or sugary snacks that spike and crash your blood sugar in the middle of the night, almond butter provides a steady source of energy that won't disrupt your sleep cycle. For those who often wake up in the middle of the night without knowing why, stabilizing blood sugar with healthy fats might be the unexpected answer. On top of that, the vitamin E in almond butter acts as a powerful antioxidant. It helps the body recover faster after physical activity, reduces mild inflammation in muscle tissue, and supports cell regeneration. This is especially valuable for people who still stay active, whether it's walking, gardening, or doing light exercise. A study published in a nutrition journal found that older adults who added a small amount of healthy fats from nuts to their dinner had higher protein retention rates and lower nighttime cortisol levels. High cortisol, a stress hormone, can increase muscle breakdown during sleep, something almond butter may help reduce to a certain extent. Using it couldn't be easier. 1 tablespoon of almond butter, eaten directly about 30 minutes before bed. If you prefer something to chew, spread it on a slice of apple, a whole grain cracker, or half a slice of whole wheat bread. The key is to choose natural almond butter, with no added sugars or hydrogenated oils, since those additives can cause inflammation and cancel out the food's natural benefits. For older adults who don't like eating much at night or have trouble digesting heavier foods, almond butter is a light, easy option. No cooking, no cleanup, easy to digest. And if you struggle to sleep deeply or often wake up feeling stiff and tired, adding a bit of almond butter to your nightly routine could lead to small but noticeable improvements over time. No need to overcomplicate it. Just be consistent. That's how older adults can take back control of their health, 1 spoonful a night for a stronger body every morning. Food 2. Tart cherry juice. We're not talking about the sugary cherry drinks you often see in prepackaged juice boxes. This is tart cherry juice, specifically the unsweetened kind, and it's one of the rare natural options that not only supports better sleep, but also helps reduce soreness and aids muscle recovery overnight. Tart cherries contain a plant compound called anthocyanin, a powerful antioxidant known for reducing inflammation and easing mild muscle pain. For younger people, this can mean quicker recovery after workouts. But for those over 60, these benefits play a more direct role, helping maintain mobility, easing morning stiffness, and supporting muscle protein synthesis during sleep. Beyond its anti-inflammatory properties, tart cherry juice also contains natural melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep cycles. As people age, their natural melatonin levels tend to decline, which can lead to trouble falling or staying asleep. Instead of turning to sleep medications, many opt for a gentler route, incorporating foods rich in natural melatonin, and tart cherry is one of the best sources out there. One clinical study found that adults aged 50 and older who drank tart cherry juice every evening for several weeks experienced a 15% improvement in sleep quality. They also reported less muscle soreness, reduced overall inflammation, and higher circulating melatonin levels in their blood. You don't need much, just 4 to 6 ounces, about 120–180 ml, before bed is enough. The key is choosing the right kind. 100% pure tart cherry juice, with no added sugar and no mix-ins from sweeter fruits. If the flavor is a bit too sharp, you can dilute it with water or add a few drops of lemon juice to balance the taste. Tart cherry doesn't just benefit your muscles. It also supports your joints, which is especially important for older adults dealing with issues in the knees, hips, or shoulders. Reducing inflammation around the joints makes it easier to move in the morning, and also helps your body repair itself during sleep, the prime time for growth hormone production and cellular regeneration. And if you're someone who tends to wake up around 2 or 3 a.m., tart cherry juice might be your natural ally for getting a fuller, more continuous night's sleep. Bonus benefit: this juice isn't habit-forming, doesn't cause daytime grogginess, and doesn't mess with your memory, a major advantage over sleep medications. For older adults, this matters. It won't interfere with alertness or balance during nighttime movement. It may seem like a simple juice, but tart cherry has the potential to protect muscle, improve sleep quality, and support joint health in a natural, safe, and easy-to-implement way. Food 1. Whey protein shake. No, this isn't just for athletes or bodybuilders. In fact, for people over 60, a whey protein shake in the evening can be one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to prevent muscle loss, boost strength, and help you wake up feeling steadier each day. Whey is a high-quality protein that contains all 9 essential amino acids, especially leucine, the amino acid that acts as a switch to kickstart muscle building. After age 60, the body becomes less responsive to protein, a phenomenon called anabolic resistance. This means you need more protein, or a stronger type, to get the same effect you used to get when you were younger. That's where whey protein shines. It's easy to digest, rapidly absorbed, and especially effective when taken before bed, right when your body enters its recovery phase. A clinical study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition tracked adults over 65 who took 40 g of whey protein every night before sleep. After a few weeks, the results showed a 22% increase in overnight muscle protein synthesis, improved balance, and faster walking speed, all without any additional exercise. Now imagine what happens when you combine whey with a light walking routine. The benefits could be even more impressive. Here's how to apply this in real life. Just take 1 scoop of whey isolate powder, ideally low in lactose and easy to digest. Mix it with water or unsweetened milk like almond milk, and drink it 30–60 minutes before bedtime. If you want to add some flavor, blend in half a banana, a spoonful of almond butter, or a pinch of cinnamon or vanilla. It enhances the taste without making it heavy. Important note: avoid mass gainers, sugary weight gain shakes, or premixed milk powders loaded with additives. These can cause bloating, indigestion, and blood sugar spikes at night. Prioritize pure, easily absorbed protein with no added sugars. Beyond feeding your muscles, whey also helps stimulate growth hormone and IGF-1 production, two crucial factors your body uses to repair and regenerate tissue while you sleep. This is deep-level repair that only happens during deep sleep, and whey provides the raw material to make it work best. If you've been feeling weaker day by day, getting up more slowly, walking less steadily, or losing muscle despite eating well, this might be the missing piece in your daily routine. Whey protein shakes aren't a miracle, but they're a practical, easy, proven way to slow age-related muscle loss. A natural process, yes, but one you can manage if you take control. So that wraps up our list of the 8 most powerful nighttime foods to help older adults protect and rebuild muscle. No drastic changes, no high costs, just choosing the right foods at the right time and staying consistent. If you do know where to start, try just one thing tonight. Just one. Pay attention to how you feel in the morning. Sometimes real change doesn't begin with something big, but with a single scoop, a glass, or a well-timed small meal. Age doesn't take away your strength, bad habits do. But here's the good news. You can change that starting tonight. You don't need to take pills. You don't need to overhaul your entire diet. All it takes is adding just one food before bed, and you'll kickstart the process of protecting and rebuilding muscle, right when your body is most ready to do it, while you're resting. So tonight, pick one of the 8 foods you just saw. No need to wait until next week. No complicated plan required, just one small change, one first step, and tomorrow morning listen to your body. Do you feel better, less stiff, less tired getting out of bed? If so, you may have just found part of the solution that millions of others are missing. This is a personal invitation for you. Comment below and tell us, which food will you choose tonight? And if you have any tips or personal experience with protecting muscle or improving sleep after 60, share it. Your real-life experience might be exactly what someone else needs to change their life. If you found this video helpful, please like it and subscribe to The Elderly Way. We don't chase trends. We focus on what's useful, practical, and proven, because life after 60 deserves to be lived at its best. See you in the next video, where every bit of information is a tool, and every piece of advice has the power to make a real difference. We can't go back to 30, but we can decide that life after 60 will be our strongest, most active, and most confident chapter yet.